Cable Pit Fighters from Otaria, Mazaura was the first to have found the Miraria Dominaria. After learning to use the chain weapon in his fights and learning to become a powerful Dementist, he adopted a nickname. Chainer Dementia Master.
Welcome to the Aether Hub. In this video we're going to look at an old legendary creature that can serve as a really fun commander. Chainer Dementia Master, and specifically, was a deck requested by one of our viewers, so special thanks to X3nium on YouTube for suggesting this deck. Chainer is a 3/3 human minion that gives all of your nightmares +1/+1. You can also pay 3 life and 3 black mana to put a target creature from a graveyard into play under your control, and it becomes a black card and a nightmare. If Chainer leaves play, you exile all of your nightmares. The Anthem effect is pretty okay, but the real power of this commander comes from that second ability, Instant Speed Reanimation. Now you repeat that, Instant Speed Reanimation. That is one of the gassiest of all black commander abilities. We can play around anything our opponents do. You want to bring back whatever creature best benefits your current needs. Do you need an effective blocker? Bring back the most powerful blocker in any graveyard. Need some nice enter the battlefield triggers? Go for it. It is an incredibly flexible ability that has the potential to go off in a really huge way, especially in multiplayer games. This deck's strategy is pretty straightforward in terms of what you're going to be doing with your cards. We're working off of a mono black control framework that has the risk of Chainer mid or late game on the table. Once he hits the field, you can begin reanimating things and bringing about your win con. But we don't want to have him hit the field right away. If there's no good cards in any graveyard worth bringing back, Chainer brings little to the table. Instead, our deck will play defensively, keeping our opponents off balance and killing off any foothold that they may try to get out. After all, whatever creatures they might have die, we can always bring back later to serve us. Let's take a look at what cards to consider running in this deck. We will want to include cards that have effective enter the battlefield triggers and some abilities that'll put bodies in the grave. Butcher of Malakir is a forced sack for opponents whenever a creature of yours dies. This is Grave Pact on a stick, and on that note, let's include Grave Pact as well and Dictate of Erebos. Fleshbag Marauder and Merciless Executioner both give us a powerful creature that forces a creature sacrifice from everyone. Given those 3 abilities from before, and they'll be sacrificing a lot more than 1 creature each. These are perfect to drop immediately after your opponent casts their commander, as it'll cause them to lose the tempo and make their commander cost 2 more next time they try to cast them. We also run some cards that'll help get bodies in our own graveyard. Chainer's ability isn't limited to just our opponent's graveyard, every dead body can be used as a resource. We can include some creatures that can sacrifice or be sacrificed to put bodies in the grave. Abhorrent Overlord can give us a flock of harpies and can sack them to trigger those Grave Pact effects. If need be, we sacrifice him and then reanimate him with Chainer to replenish our harpy swarm. Burnished Hart is great mana ramp. Since we're in mono black, this is actually pretty tricky to pull off. Corpse Connoisseur is great in this deck. You can effectively use it as a tutor. Let it hit the battlefield, then you can send whichever creature you want to reanimate to the graveyard, use Chainer to reanimate it, rinse and repeat whenever necessary. Disciple of Bolas gives us card draw and life gain, and is a sack outlet on its own. A similar effect can be said of Disciple of Griselbrand. Altar of Dementia is super powerful in that you can sack a big creature like Overlord, then your opponent has to mill cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power. Hey, would you look at that, more fodder to bring back with Chainer. Nevinyrral's Disc can clean up a board, putting plenty of bodies in perfect reach for Chainer, and Whip Up Erebos can be a nice reanimation ability with the benefit of lifelink as well. Lastly, I think Black has one of the best draw engines in all of Commander. We have access to cards like Dark Prophecy, Infernal Tribute, Necropotence, all great options for this deck to draw more cards. If we need some tutor abilities, something like Vampiric or Demonic Tutor can go for whatever spell we need. Speaking of kill spells, we run a couple nice board wipes that'll help clean the slate and get tons of corpses set to be brought back by Chainer. Black Sun Zenith, Mutilate, and Toxic Deluge are great ways of working around any indestructibility. Living Death is a fun card to make use of all of your creatures that you might not have the life left to spare for Chainer to recover. And lastly, Decree of Pain can give you a ton of card draw. Of course, if you can afford it, Damnation is always Damnation, but for the sake of this list, we have omitted it. We do run a single Planeswalker in this deck, Liliana of the Dark Realms. She is great to pull swamps from your deck, and she gives a huge buff to a creature, or she can kill off a creature, whichever you choose. Her best value though is in her ultimate. Once you can tap your swamps for 4 mana each, you've already won the game. One of the best things about the reanimation aspect of this deck is that if you use Chainer's ability, any creature only costs 3 black mana and 3 life. You can bring back as large of a creature as you want. You want to bring back some big Eldrazi? That Betrays is a great choice, being able to snatch up anything your opponent has to sacrifice. Massacre Worm can act as a board wipe against token decks, and that 2 life lost for each creature that dies can add up pretty quickly. Mikaeus the Unhallowed can help protect our board from any board wipes, giving them undying as long as they're not human. Another thing about Chainer's ability is since you're not casting it, it can't be countered, so the creatures that come into play are safe from any counter spells. Being in mono black, we can put together a relatively budget mana base as we don't have the need for things like fetch lands or dual lands. We run Bojuka Bog to eliminate any graveyard that might not have any goodies in it for us. Crypt of Agadeem benefits us the most when we have more creatures sitting in our own graveyard. For even more ramp, Cabal Coffers nets us a ton of mana the more swamps we have in play. While we run 30 regular swamps, Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth will make everything a swamp, giving even further use to some of the utility lands we may need to run, like Viral's Stronghold, which is great for additional recursion. All these black mana symbols are useful for Nykthos, which is always a great include for a monocolored deck. Thespian Stage and Vesuva are additional copies of the Coffers or Crypt, should we need more of one of them in play for additional mana. With all of this mana, we can use Chainer's ability without worrying about running dry on mana. Lastly, for some good protection from any opposing fatty or an opponent's commander, Maze of Ith will wrap up our 39 lands, having a nice fog-like ability for that one target creature. For non-land mana sources, we do run the Phyrexian Altar, which is another great sack outlet which can produce black mana, Caged Sun, which benefits everything we play and makes our swamps tap for double, and Cryptghast, which, again, gives us an extra black mana whenever we tap a swamp. If you want to play Chainer, you're going to need more than anything the ability to determine the value of creatures. The things your opponent sends to the grave, you need to be able to determine whether or not it's worth regenerating. There's no sense in recovering something like a Mana Dork, as it's going to give you very little value towards your win condition. Now, if your opponent has a creature die that has a super powerful ability or a high enough power that you can start swinging in for massive damage, those will be the cards you want to go for. Kill off whatever the biggest threat is, as they'll later serve you. Being in a game with more players means you'll have more options for targets for Chainer's ability. You have your pick of the litter when bringing back big creatures, and it will bolster your board to bring back only the best creatures. We obviously don't run a very fast deck. Much of our power comes from forcing opponents to throw away their cards before we get ours running, and our ability to snatch those cards up. That's going to wrap up our tech on Chainer. What do you think of this build? If you want to see the full deck list, we've included it in the description of this video. Remember to like and share this video with your Magic the Gathering play group, and if there's a commander that you'd like to see covered in a future video, again, let us know in the comments below.